Yo, what's going on, guys? It's gmeiners here. I've been seeing a few videos over the last month or so saying that Ager Scepter is kind of cracked for DPS, and I've always known it to be a super solid weapon against champs and majors, but when it comes to bosses, I've never actually seen it used. So in this video, I wanted to go through and DPS test the weapon, but more specifically with the Catalyst active to see where it ranks. And the results actually surprised the hell out of me. I thought this weapon was super overhyped, but it honestly competes with LFRs in certain cases, which makes it a super strong special weapon to pair with DPS loadouts. If you guys do enjoy these DPS testing videos and you want to see more like them on the channel, make sure to drop a like and sub down below. Only 17% of you guys that watch these videos are actually subbed, so smack that red button and let's take a look at some numbers. So first and foremost, let's see how hard this weapon hits against Carl, and then I'm also actually going to be testing it in one other place. So looking at Carl first, we hit at base for 2258 in the head, and then when we activate the Catalyst, this gives us a massive boost in DPS of 80%, so this now hits for 4065 damage per crit. Testing in this other lost sector, we actually hit the boss for 1791 damage, and then once again, with the Catalyst active, this bumps up to 3223. Now, the reason that these are different numbers and that I tested in two locations in the first place was because different weapons actually deal different amounts of damage to different enemy types. I had no clue this even existed in the game, or maybe I did and it usually just doesn't have a huge effect, so I forgot about it. But either way, this means when comparing the DPS values of, let's say, a linear fusion rifle to a trace rifle like we're doing in this video, if we test against a major versus an actual boss, one might perform better against different enemy types, giving us misleading information. This first came to my attention from Imagine, whose video will be linked below. For the most part, if comparing the same weapon type against the same weapon type, this makes no difference. But I wanted to compare Agers in this video against LFRs, so I wanted to get accurate boss and major damage values, because as you can see here, trace rifles hit much harder against non-boss enemy types. I probably won't do this for every DPS testing video, especially since boss damage can be hard to compare against different bosses, but I wanted to kind of acknowledge that I know this exists and it can make slight differences of around 10%. So taking these values and comparing them with the time it takes to shoot one full mag of Ager Scepter, you can see that we will automatically overflow our magazine to 194 rounds. And shooting all of this off is doable before our super gets drained in 12.86 seconds. So for majors, this will bring Ager Scepter DPS up to 61,333 damage per second. And if you're curious, that is just under 800,000 total damage, which is on par with most linear fusion rifles in the game, maybe slightly under. For bosses, on the other hand, taking the lower damage number for trace rifles that we saw, this would come to 48,621 damage per second, and then in total, this would be 625,000 damage, which is still extremely strong for a trace rifle or just a special weapon in this game, but there are going to be a few major factors which are actually going to drastically increase the DPS of Ager Scepter beyond these baselines. If you look into how Agers freezes enemies, when the Catalyst is active, your super is going to be draining, and then each shot actually applies 20 slow stacks. Once you reach 100 slow stacks, an enemy, regardless of its rank, should freeze, and as you can see here, shooting Carl 5 times freezes him. Shooting a bit more beyond this point then causes him to break out of this frozen state and also deal shatter damage directly to him. The least amount of shots I have seen it take to cause the shatter is 4, which means every 9 shots we shoot, we are going to be able to create a shatter, dealing extra damage. On top of this, if you end up running the Fragment Whisper of Fissures while on stasis, this also increases the shatter damage you deal. At a base, a shatter should deal 200 damage, which are going to be relative numbers, and then with fissures, this should add 25 extra damage, which is a 12.5% increase in the total shatter. Our shatter, without fissures, deals 9,645 damage, and then when fissures is applied, this also adds an extra 1205 damage to this, which is exactly a 12.5% increase. So factoring in that every 9 shots creates a shatter that also deals a total of 10,850 extra damage with fissures, in one mag of 194, this will trigger 21 times, which jumps our total damage up to 1.016 million, which brings our DPS in the same amount of time to 79,000. Bosses, on the other hand, will automatically unfreeze themselves, and when they do, as you can see, this deals massive amounts of damage. However, When testing, I realized that if you are just continuously firing, then you're going to be the cause of the shatter, which doesn't deal this increased burst in damage. In this Lost Sector, if we ignore the large 40,000 value, we cause a shatter with Whisper of Fissures for a total of 9749 damage, and then once again applying the same 21 total shatters over a single mag. Our DPS against bosses would then come out to 64,000 damage per second, and then 830,000 total damage, which is actually super strong. I'm honestly not sure if there would be a method that exists that allows you to wait for the boss to shatter efficiently to deal this increased burst of damage that we see, but assuming a full team is actually dealing damage, I don't think this would be possible. But with that said, the last super easy thing you can do to increase your damage is add Font of Might into the build for an extra 25%. This is super easy to do with the builds that I have linked in the description below, and also when using Supreme Wellmaker. This will only buff the base weapon damage by 25%, so nothing increases on the shatter. However, the reason I think this is important to include compared to most other options in the game is because, as I just mentioned, proccing this buff is way easier on stasis. So if we include this in a damage phase against the boss, this ends up jumping our total DPS against bosses up to 76.7 thousand DPS. Against majors, on the other hand, and champions, this would be dealing a whopping 94.4 thousand damage per second, which is amongst the highest burst DPS in the entire game. I would say if this thing ever got a chance where it hit bosses as hard as it hits majors, then it would easily be a meta damage option to run. I think where it sits right now, needing to consume your super to deal decent DPS kind of hurts it. This would definitely be better than using most stasis supers, especially in end game content, but overall, it still deals extremely good DPS. The total damage output is also solid, and then keep in mind, this is just one full mag, not the entire reserves. Plus, it deals as consistent DPS as possible, where other weapons fluctuate over time in between shots. The major benefit of this weapon is that you can also use it as a primary as long as there is enough ammo for your team, and the ad clear is actually nuts with this thing. So I would easily say this is currently one of the best ad clear and DPS weapons in the game, when not many other weapons are also able to do both. Let me know your guys' thoughts on Ager's and its DPS in the comments below. Do you think it's worth using, not worth using, and did you expect it to lie where it does? I do also stream a bunch over on my Twitch where we do speedruns and low mans live. A link to that and my Discord server is in the description below. Anyways, that's all for this video, guys. As always, have a good one. Peace.